this one's gonna hurt, but I gotta address it. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And it's one of the most used out of context verses in the Bible. I know. I love that verse too, okay? Let's just say it. But using it the way some folks do out of context, it leads to a lot of pain. It's kind of like, I know you have terminal cancer, or I know you lost your job, or I know you were abused throughout your life by people that you trusted, but it's okay. Jeremiah 29:11 says, For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. And you just need a little more faith, and everything will get better. And I say this from experience, because when our son lay dying in the hospital, that verse was used in prayer over him by well-intentioned folks at least a dozen times, and was also used to try and instill hope in us. And our son died in our arms days later. Like I said, good intentions, horrendous application. I love that verse. It's a favorite. It's powerful. It's uplifting. But we flippantly offer this verse to people who've lost loved ones, folks on death's door, diagnosed with terrible diseases. We use that verse basically to anyone suffering or worrying about anything. But what happens if the cancer doesn't go away? When the grief is too overwhelming and when the hits keep coming? It can instill bitterness or even more fear and self-condemnation. I have enough faith. What am I doing wrong? What more do I need to do to see God prosper me? Why doesn't God love me the way God loves them? Am I out of God's will? Is the Bible lying? You see how it can go? Because no, the verse is not lying. God loves you. It's just this verse is being used way out of context. In context, Jeremiah 29:11 was spoken to the Israelites in the throes of the Babylonian exile. Jerusalem had been reduced to rubble. The Temple of Solomon was in ashes, and every item of value in the kingdom stolen. Bleak doesn't even begin to describe the situation, and people were desiring an immediate rescue from God, but the immediate rescue did not come. God's response was not to provide rescue from their immediate difficulties, but rather God had a bigger picture in mind that took place over 70 some odd years for a people group, not individuals. 70 years is a long time for a human individual, but over the span of human history and for an eternal God, not so much. Because in context, this verse isn't about individuals. It's for entire groups of people, and that's a little bit different than the way we usually offer it. This verse is not about immediate personal and material prosperity. It's about the wonderful character of God, and that God has a big picture in mind, that all things work together for good. And even when it looks like God isn't there, God is there. You get the distinction? All things may not be good, but God will redeem all things for good. Let me put it this way. The Christians getting their throats ripped out by the lions in their arena probably wouldn't have been comforted if the crowd cheered, "Don't worry, for I know the plans I have for you. The Lord declares plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." To those individuals getting killed, things sucked. But as a people group, the sacrifice of those in the arena fueled a faith that has brought hope and love to a world in desperate need for 2,000 years. God does have a plan for us, but it's not an escape from your hardship to never face pain plan. Just as Jesus had to face the cross, just as the apostles each suffered immensely, we each have to face our own crucible. Jesus never promised a lack of pain or suffering in this world. In fact, he promised the opposite in John 15:19 through 21, John 16:12, Matthew 5:10 through 12, Matthew 44, Matthew 10:16 through 22, Matthew 13:31, Matthew 24:9, Mark 4:17, Mark 10:29 through 30, Luke 49, and Luke 21:12, just to name a few. So like I said, Jeremiah 29:11, it's a favorite. And if it speaks to you, sure, there's no harm in adopting it for yourself. Just be aware of its actual context and meaning, and be careful when tossing it on others who are suffering, because it might have the opposite effect of what you, with good intentions, intended. But as far as me and mine, the verse did ring true in its own way. Because while our son did die, it was our son's earthly death that launched my wife and I both into an incredible, deeper journey of faith beyond surfacey nonsense that years later led to a face-to-face meeting with the King of the universe. But that's another story for another time. God bless. See you soon.